Hi everyone, it's Sharon from Shazstitchcook here. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my stitching process and setup before I do a little stitch with me. So I mainly work on Gecko Rouge kits. I do work on some other projects as well, but mainly it's Gecko Rouge kits that I have. So when I'm setting up my projects, I'm working off kit cards. My project, as you can see here, is currently stitching on a quantum frame, and I use a Monstrix stand with that. That makes it really easy for me to flip over to the back of the project and to access the back to start and stop my threads. All of my threads are started and stopped on the back. I don't do pin stitches or waist knots or anything like that. I generally prefer to stitch my projects 1/1 full cross. So this is 25 count 1/1 full cross. I have done 28 count 1/1 full cross as well, just to make a project a bit smaller. And I do have some projects which are on 18 count purely because the project is relatively small to start with. So when I'm kitting up and getting ready with these projects, obviously the first thing I do is sort out my fabric, make sure I have my fabric the right way round and put it onto my frame. The next thing that I do is, because I like to keep my floss still on the kit cards, what I do is actually I put all of the floss on these plastic rings purely just to make the card last a bit longer so that they don't wear out, and I find that doing this the cards look as good as new even when I've finished a project. The other thing that I do, as you'll see, is I pre-cut all my floss. So the floss is already at roughly this length when it arrives in a new kit. And all I do is I snip the ends and put it on the rings. That means that apart from when I'm starting and finishing threads, or when I'm finishing threads, I actually don't need to use my scissors at any time during the project, except apart from the occasional knot maybe. So I actually keep my scissors on the back of my project, and you can't see at the moment because they're just off to the left, but actually they're just on a magnet. And they just stay on the back of my project, so they're easy to access just where I need them. I'll just move them back over there. You will also be able to see I've got a lot of needles here. That's because I try to have one needle per colour. The way I work is that I take one length of 6 strands of floss off my card as I need it. I take one of those strands for my stitching, and the rest go onto these floss organisers. Now what you'll see is that, for example, this yellow colour, I've got my leftover strands from my length of thread, but I also have a needle here that I always park to the right of the stand so I can be sure that the colour correlates to the correct colour on the chart. So when I'm starting and stopping, if I've got a lot of confetti, for example, there's a good chance that I already have the colour in place, and more often than not I also have a threaded needle ready to go. This just makes it more efficient for me to work as I explain sort of my process of the actual stitching itself, because I do a lot of starting and stopping that it saves me having to thread needles all the time, or having to go back to my kit cards all the time. So this project has 80 colours, so I have 2 of these on a stand to my left that I can just pull out the colours. I don't stitch on paper, it's no surprise really, but I do use Pattern Keeper. So this is the Gecko Rouge chart in Pattern Keeper. And as I explain my actual stitching process, I'll show you a little bit more on how I work here. The other app that I use is called Hours Tracker. So this app I set up a job per project. For example, this was Piccadilly Circus, which was one of my previous jobs that I've now finished. So whenever I sit down to stitch, I just tap the clock in button, and I can pause if I'm getting up for a cup of coffee or something like that, and then a clock out when I've finished stitching for that session. And you can see on the right hand side here, based on a certain date, how many hours I may have stitched. And I've put in an arbitrary cost per hour just for my own whim, really, of £9.50 an hour, for example, just to see how much I would have made, but that's just purely for fun, for no other reason. So going back to Pattern Keeper, just to show you how I work. So I work from the top left to the bottom right, and I work cross country, but I focus in a 10 by 10 square. So if I zoom out, you will see that the project so far has sort of filled up across the top, and I'm working on a row here in a 10 by 10 area. So if I just zoom back in again, okay, what I do is that when I get to a 10 by 10 block, such as this one, I will pick the very first block that is not stitched, and I will stitch that cross country for either the length of the floss that I have, or until I have to jump more than about 6 stitches. If I have to jump more than about 6 stitches, that would be using less floss if I just stop and restart my threads. So if I have to jump that far, or if I've finished that length of floss, I would then mark all my stitches off, and I will literally just go to the next block, the next empty colour in that block, and do the same again. So what you find is that you are working in a very methodical way, because you are filling up each 10 by 10 block. I'm not sitting there thinking about, oh, what colour shall I stitch next, or which colour has the most stitches, or anything like that. I'm being very methodical by just choosing the next colour that's available in the block, but then I'm using the cross country to stitch the way that the project wants to flow, really. I turn off the page block, so I don't know how many pages I've done. Of course I can see how many stitches I've done in that time. The combination of having the pre-threaded needles and the floss to hand, the pre-cut floss, and working in this method works really well for me to be efficient. I can quite often easily get 200 full crosses an hour working this way, unless it's particularly heavy confetti, in which case I might be down to, say, 130, 140 stitches an hour. Now obviously that works for me. That's just how I prefer to stitch, and I quite enjoy the controlled chaos, as I would describe it, of the method of filling in my blocks, whilst at the same time the flow of the colours going in the directions as they go. So as you can see from my project here, the project has filled up from the top downwards. I'm still getting my flow of colours. I'm still working cross country, but the artwork is filling in from the top down, which I really like the look of, really, to be honest. So that's how I like to stitch. I just thought I'd share that with you in case you're interested. I will be back shortly now just to do a stitch with me, so I will zoom in and we will just start to focus on this area here. Speak soon.